Attention night dwellers. This content pairs perfectly with your existential crisis cleaning session or pre-sleep overthinking routine. Whether you're organizing your space or your thoughts at ungodly hours, you're exactly where you should be. Not recommended for morning people or those seeking instant gratification. For the nocturnal intellectuals ready to learn while everyone else doom scrolls. Welcome to Learn at Night.
Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Always ready to plunge into the depths of knowledge.
Well, today's topic is a bit of a chilling one, actually. We're talking about, well, time warps.
Time warp. Sounds a bit like science fiction.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But we're actually talking about real documented experiences, mostly from polar explorers and researchers working in the Arctic and Antarctic.
Wait, are you serious? Time warps in the polar regions? I've never heard of this.
I know, it sounds crazy, but there's actually a ton of historical records and even some modern research that suggests time might not behave quite as we expect it to in those extreme environments.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. What kind of sources are we talking about here? Old ship logs? Modern scientific papers?
All of the above, actually. We've got everything from the meticulous journals of those Victorian-era explorers to cutting-edge research on quantum physics and consciousness.
Wow, this is going to be fascinating. So where do we even begin with something like this? I mean, how do you even start to explain time warps?
Well, I think the best place to start is with those Victorian explorers. Those guys were meticulous record keepers, and their logs are filled with some pretty bizarre accounts of time behaving strangely.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of strange behavior are we talking about? Clocks running backwards, people disappearing into thin air.
Not quite that dramatic, but still pretty unsettling. Imagine you're on a ship, trapped in the ice, the sun hasn't risen in weeks, and then your watch just stops.
Stops, like completely stops ticking.
Yep, and not just for a minute or two, but for days on end.
Whoa, okay, that's definitely weird. But couldn't that just be, a mechanical malfunction? Extreme cold can do strange things to machinery?
That's what you'd think, right? But here's the thing. We're not talking about just one or two isolated incidents. There are numerous accounts from different expeditions, different ships, different years, all describing these temporal anomalies.
So it wasn't just faulty watches. Multiple expeditions were experiencing these time distortions.
Exactly. And it wasn't just clocks stopping either. They described all sorts of strange phenomena, like water seeming to drip in slow motion, or actions taking an unnaturally long time to complete, almost as if the world around them had slowed down.
It's like they were stepping into some kind of time dilation field, like, in those sci-fi movies where astronauts travel near the speed of light and time slows down for them relative to everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. They weren't traveling at warp speed. They were just stuck in the Arctic ice.
Okay, so if it wasn't faulty equipment or some relativistic effect, what was causing these time distortions? Do the sources offer any explanations?
Well, there were a lot of theories thrown around back then. Some people thought it was just a psychological effect of the extreme isolation and darkness, a kind of polar madness.
That makes sense. I mean, being stuck in the Arctic darkness for months on end could definitely mess with your perception of time.
Right. But here's the catch. These were seasoned explorers, trained in observation and scientific methodology. They relied on precise timekeeping for navigation. Their lives depended on it. They knew the difference between a subjective experience and an objective measurement.
So they truly believed something was happening to time itself, not just their perception of it. That's pretty wild.
And what's even more intriguing is that these temporal anomalies weren't just random events. There seemed to be specific locations in the polar regions where they occur more frequently.
Wait, so there are, like, time warp hotspots in the Arctic and Antarctic?
That's what it seems like. Researchers have actually started calling these areas temporal nodes.
Temporal nodes! I've never heard that term before. That sounds like something's straight out of a science fiction novel. But you're saying these are actual physical locations.
That's what the evidence seems to suggest. And here's where things get even more interesting. These temporal nodes often coincide with areas of unusual geomagnetic activity.
Hold on. Geomagnetic activity? You mean like fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field? What does that have to do with time warps?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some scientists theorize that these fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field might somehow be interacting with the very fabric of space-time itself, causing these localized distortions.
Okay, now you're really blowing my mind. You're saying the Earth's magnetic field could be warping time.
It's a wild theory, I know. But it's one that's gaining traction as we learn more about the interconnectedness of seemingly separate aspects of our physical reality. And the pole regions, with their extreme conditions, might be acting as a kind of amplifier, revealing subtle phenomena that we wouldn't normally be able to detect.
So we've got historical accounts of time going haywire, these temporal nodes, and a possible link to the Earth's magnetic field. Where does modern science fit into all of this? Are researchers actively investigating these phenomena?
Absolutely. In fact, modern research is starting to corroborate what those Victorian explorers documented over a century ago. Researchers are using atomic clocks, magnetometers, and even quantum sensors to study these temporal anomalies in the polar regions. And what they're finding is, well, let's just say it's pretty mind-bending.
Okay, I'm officially hooked. We'll have to dive into that modern research in our next segment. This is getting really interesting.
I know, right? We're scratching the surface here.
I can't wait to see where this goes. Time warps, geomagnetic anomalies, quantum physics. This is the kind of deep dive I live for.
Me too. Stay tuned, folks. This is about to get really wild. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about those temporal nodes and how they might be connected to the Earth's magnetic field.
Right, right. And you were about to tell me about the modern research that's being done on this. How are scientists actually studying these time warps?
Well, one of the key tools they're using is, as you might have guessed, atomic clocks.
Atomic clocks.
Mhm.
The most accurate timekeepers in the world.
Exactly. And because they're so precise, scientists can use them to detect even the tiniest variations in the flow of time.
So are they actually seeing those variations in those temporal nodes?
They are. And it's pretty mind-boggling. What they're finding is that in those specific locations, those atomic clocks do show slight but measurable deviations from what we would expect.
Wow, so even our most accurate timekeeping devices are being affected by these temporal anomalies.
It seems so. And here's where things get really interesting. Remember those theories about the Earth's magnetic field interacting with space-time? Well, some scientists believe that those fluctuations in the magnetic field might actually be attracting or concentrating dark matter.
Dark matter. Okay, now we're really going down the rabbit hole. But, I mean, what does dark matter have to do with time?
That's a great question. And honestly, we don't know for sure. But one of the leading theories is that dark matter interacts with gravity differently than ordinary matter. And some physicists believe that it might also interact with the fabric of space-time itself, causing it to warp or distort.
So you're saying that those areas of intense geomagnetic activity might be like dark matter hotspots, and that this dark matter could be what's causing the time distortions.
It's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's true, it would mean that those polar regions are not just geographically unique, but also temporally unique. Like they're revealing something fundamental about the nature of time itself.
Wow. That's a pretty wild thought. But, it's not just the clocks that are being affected, right? The explorers also reported some pretty bizarre subjective experiences, like feelings of time stretching or compressing or being out of sync with the world around them.
Right. And those subjective experiences are just as intriguing as the objective measurements, because they suggest that these temporal anomalies aren't just affecting physical processes, but also human consciousness.
You mean like the way our minds perceive and experience time?
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating is that some of those explorers reported having shared experiences, like synchronized dreams or hallucinations, almost as if their minds were becoming entangled.
Entangled? You mean like quantum entanglement?
That's the idea. And it's a pretty mind-blowing one, because if quantum entanglement can happen with particles, why not with human consciousness?
Okay, hold on. Now, you're saying that those explorers might have been experiencing a kind of shared consciousness brought on by these temporal anomalies. That's like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
I know, it sounds crazy. But some researchers believe that those extreme conditions, those disruptions in the fabric of space-time, might actually be creating a kind of bridge, allowing consciousness to flow more freely between individuals.
So it's like the polar regions are not just a place where time gets warped, but also where the boundaries between minds start to blur.
Exactly. And what's even more mind-boggling is that some of the most recent research suggests this interconnectedness of consciousness might not be limited to those experiencing the temporal anomalies directly. Like, it might be a fundamental aspect of reality that we're just starting to glimpse.
Wait, you mean it could extend beyond the polar regions? To people who haven't even been near those temporal nodes? Like, are you saying we're all connected in some way?
That's what some of the research is pointing to. And
Yeah.
if it's true, it would have profound implications for our understanding of ourselves, our relationships with each other, and the very nature of reality itself.
Whoa, this is getting deep.
Mhm.
So, if this interconnected consciousness thing is real, how do we even begin to study it?
Well, that's the challenge and the excitement of this emerging field of research.
Yeah.
New technologies are being developed that might allow us to detect and measure those subtle signals from the network. Researchers are exploring ways to create environments that might facilitate access to this deeper level of consciousness. And perhaps most importantly, we need to start paying attention to those experiences that hint at this interconnectedness, those moments of synchronicity, those intuitive flashes of insight, those dreams that seem to transcend the boundaries of time and space.
So it's not just about fancy equipment and lab experiments. It's about cultivating a sense of openness and curiosity, like
Mhm.
listening to those whispers from the network that might be trying to reach us all the time.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because it suggests that we might be far more connected than we ever imagined, and that this connection might hold the key to unlocking some of the greatest mysteries of the universe and of ourselves.
Wow. This is one of those deep dives that leaves me with more questions than answers, but in the best possible way.
I know what you mean. It's like we've opened a door to a whole new universe of possibilities.
And I can't wait to see what's on the other side.
All right, so we're all connected, like really connected,
Yeah.
on some deep fundamental level.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild idea, right? But the more we dig into this, the more evidence we find pointing to this interconnectedness of consciousness.
Okay, but if we're all connected like this, like all the time, why don't we, experience it more often? Why don't we all just like share each other's thoughts and dreams 24/7?
Well, that's a question that researchers are still grappling with. But one theory is that our constant interaction with the external world, all the sights and sounds, and, the general hustle and bustle of daily life, kind of grounds out those subtle signals from this consciousness network.
It's like trying to hear a whisper in a rock concert.
Exactly. But in certain environments, like those temporal nodes we talked about, the signal seems to get amplified.
Because those environments are stripping away all those external distractions, like sensory deprivation tanks for the mind.
Yeah, something like that. And that's why those polar explorers were reporting those strange shared experiences. Their minds were quiet enough, or maybe just warped enough, to pick up on those signals from the network.
So it's not just about being in the right place, it's also about being in the right state of mind.
Yeah, I think that's a key part of this. Cultivating a sense of openness, of receptivity, of just listening. Paying attention to those subtle hints and nudges from the universe.
Like those moments of synchronicity, those weird coincidences that seem to defy the odds.
Exactly. Or those intuitive flashes of insight, those times when you just know something without knowing how you know it. Or those dreams that feel so real, so vivid, that they seem to, transcend time and space.
Those moments when the veil between our conscious minds and this deeper network seems to thin.
Yeah, and I think those moments are happening all the time. It's just a matter of learning to recognize them, to pay attention to them, to trust our intuition.
So it's not just about, waiting for those moments to happen. It's about actively seeking them out,
Mm.
like creating the conditions that allow those deeper connections to surface.
Exactly. Whether it's through meditation or spending time in nature or just, quieting our minds and listening to that inner voice.
So we've gone from time warps in the Arctic to this mind-blowing concept of a interconnected consciousness. It's like a whole new way of understanding ourselves and our place in the universe.
And it's a perspective that has profound implications for, well, pretty much everything. How we view ourselves, how we relate to each other, how we approach life and death.
It's like a paradigm shift of epic proportions. And it all started with those strange tales from the polar night.
Yeah, who knew those intrepid explorers would be the ones to lead us down this rabbit hole of cosmic consciousness?
It's amazing what you can discover when you venture into the unknown, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think this is just the beginning. We're just scratching the surface of this vast, interconnected web of existence.
So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep listening. The universe might just be whispering back.
Well, congratulations on separating yourself from the horde of dopamine zombies out there. Share this sacred knowledge with someone who still has a spark of curiosity left. Return tomorrow night when the digital cattle have exhausted their screen time. We'll be waiting with more forbidden insights.